You join me leaning over the edge of Midford Viaduct today on the Somerset and Dorset, but we're not here to film the Somerset and Dorset today. Please ignore the drone sound. That's for another video. We are here leaning over what would have been the route of the Titfield Thunderbolt. Now, I've been here before and explored it several times now, but we're not here to talk about that today. There is a miniature version of the Titfield Thunderbolt to look at, and we're going to have a review of that today.
Now, I don't usually do model reviews, I'm not Sam's Trains, but I've done many videos about the film where Reverend Sam plays with trains. So when Rapido Trains announced that they were making not only the whole train from the finale, but also Valentine's bar car, I thought it was too good to be true. But is it all a cheap excuse to make money from something that's already beloved by railway fans? Well, we'll focus on the loco today, and also visit the star herself in Liverpool to compare. But right now, I'm sure you just want to see the model running.
We want the Titfield Thunderbolt! Careful! Hey, careful now, slowly! Don't bump her! Don't bump her! Hold it a minute.
First impressions are good. Being such a small loco, it could have easily needed an annoying permanent coupling to the tender, but the two simply clip together and hold quite well, with a good amount of flexibility. You'd expect this as a given, but proportion-wise everything seems right, and at least on my model, nothing major appears to be damaged. There is no front coupling, but to accommodate the gap behind the buffer beam, I can see that if there was one, it would greatly obscure the detail. At most, perhaps a delicately designed removable NEM pocket could have been mounted at the tops of the cylinders, but I think they made the right decision by not having one at all. Really, who is going to need to run this loco backwards? On the tender, there's a small toy-like hook, and on the front there's a separately fitted chain instead. I don't think I've actually seen a chain provided with a model, usually it's a piece of plastic shaped to look like one. But this means it sways slightly as the loco moves and gives it more life. Life and character is all about this model, being a film star of course, but also with the animated movements of the outside cranks. One of the most delicate parts, and it is warned to never pick up the model by holding the coupling rods. I tend to pinch the frames at the back of the cab and hold underneath the front buffer beam. Whilst the coupling rods aren't metal, they are very nicely turned out in plastic. Provided separately are 4 covers to hide the screws on the axles, which are recommended to glue once satisfied that everything is running smoothly. I am a little hesitant about getting glue on the screw itself, so I'm sure others may feel the same, particularly as some are perhaps buying this outside of the modelling hobby, but rather to have a miniature film display piece. Further along the chassis, a hidden feature is the axle under the cab, extending right up to the axle boxes, even though on the model it doesn't really need to. And along all of the frames and smokebox is a good show of raised rivets. There are some missing in places, like along the front of the firebox cover, which does suffer slightly from seam lines being visible along the top and front. The wood panelling helps to disguise it, but there's also one under the nameplate, and very faint lines on the smokebox. The cab is of course primitive, but all the details are intricately moulded. I like how the regulator bracket is hollow to show how the handle moves, and all the controls that fail in the film are present here. I did notice that the reverser handle appears to be bent, though it's not surprising given how thin these parts are. However, when looking at the real Lion today, the handle is in fact twisted, so they can get away with it this time. overall a good job representing 1950s Lion, with the pressure gauge above the water gauge, something it didn't have when restored 20 years earlier. I can't see a handle for the damper though, which was fitted during production. The plate on the back head would also have been nice to have been picked out in brass instead of being plain black. The sheet around the cab is very plain on the inside, like my brain, whilst on the outside I feel like the red ironwork isn't as raised as much as it should be, making it all look rather two-dimensional. On the tender is a hinged full plate that lowers down across the gap in the cab, which I really like, but it does occasionally get stuck. A plastic coal load is included, which I don't like so much. Thankfully, it can be removed to put in a more realistic coal instead. The buffers are not sprung, which is a good thing for a change, because they are made of leather on the real loco. The buffer beams are wooden prototypically, with a metal running plate sitting on top, so it is a shame that neither of these textures are present on the model. Speaking of textures, the brasswork over the firebox is a suitable colour, but the wood panelling over the boiler is a very plain brown. Whilst unique features like the patterns on the chimney are very crisp, overall I do feel like the colours are on the bright side. Of course, adding wood grain on this scale can make things look much worse, but more the issue is the red appears far too bright. It is an early colour film, and the novelty red and green livery may appear darker as a result, but on the model it's more of a vermilion that's used, and it's very in your face. From what I've seen of other Rapido trains models, lighter shades do seem to be the trend. My only guess would be that it makes it easier for modelers to weather down, but as it's a ready to run model, I think it's better to set the colours as accurately as possible right out of the box. This is a scale model, not a toy, with a price label to prove it. With that in mind, how well does it play? This is the model running straight out of the box, or at least once I'd taken it out of the box and put it on some powered track. Considering it's a tiny 042, with basically the same room inside as some narrow gauge models to house the motor, it's a strong start. Going backwards, it was more inconsistent, but it hasn't cut out running over any points. The instruction manual states that you should let the model run in for about 40 minutes each way, and so here's how it performs after that. Greatly improved. I would show you how much this model can pull before it starts to slip, but to be honest, Rapido trains themselves showed off in a video of it pulling 30 wagons with ease, and that is more than enough for me. Really, you're unlikely to ever run this with ridiculously long trains. That's if you don't purely run it with the associated Titfield Thunderbolt stock. There's an impressive amount of metal on the model, weighing in at 179 grams, so it's more than capable for realistic length trains and gradients. Something I wasn't expecting is that the loco doesn't work if not connected to the tender, so keep that in mind for anyone who's brave enough to kitbash Lion into a tank engine. Before I sum up my final thoughts on the loco, I took a trip to see the real caged Lion herself.
We have made it to the Museum of Liverpool. It's been 8 years since I've been here. There's the Liver building. There's the waterfront. And then Albert Docks over there. Let's go find the lion. I'm gonna go find Lion. It's this way, I just know it. Mainly because it's a steam engine, it's probably on the ground floor, unless it's the Glasgow Transport Museum. Found it! It's Lion! It's just Lion there! Yay! I remember it being very dark in here.
This is a nice little
Bigger than you think. Oh yeah, fair.
Because we've just been to the railway with the miniature engines.
Oh yeah,
This seems really big.
We've
now.
come straight from the Ravenglass and Eskdale, so this is like, again, huge. We're back to standard gauge.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, yeah. So I was expecting the handrail to be bent from the Titfield Thunderbolt, but clearly this is a new one. It almost looks fake, actually. It's definitely been replaced. It's a miniature lion! Baby lion. A lion cub, if you will. I've got a soft spot for this engine. I mean, I'm not really into like the really early railway age, but Lion makes an exception. This is Thunderbolt. Oh, it's on fire. Yeah. So when I first met Holly many years ago, when I first got your number, that successful moment, first time I texted you was right here, standing next to Lion, and I remember that. So it's nice to be back, engaged, you know. Tiny little padded buffers. It's like horseshoes.
Those
Crazy.
people undertaking new railway.
And during the filming, you know, when the villagers are pushing the train near towards the end, it whacked into Lion at such velocity that the tender got slightly damaged. But I think they've repaired it now, because it was running in the 80s, so... Original Salter safety belts. Such an empty cab. It's even got the tricox to like check the water level just by a tap. And you see in the film when they're like stepping up, this whole cab side just wobbles. Such a thin piece of metal. Very ornate all the same though. Certainly make it slightly hard to photograph Lion down here. Not just because it's like such a big item obviously, but like lighting wise. Very dark in here. So the reason this is preserved is they literally just found it by chance in the docks. They were using it as like a pumping engine. They thought, let's restore it and return it as a steam engine. But they don't know for certain if it actually was Lion or another engine. But it's Lion now.
I've thundered on for quite a bit, so in the next part of this video, I'll be taking a closer look at the rolling stock provided in this pack, as well as the Wisbech and Upwell tramway car, before seeing if I can add some details to make them all my own. Subscribe to be ready for that, and perhaps consider supporting me on Patreon to see it before everyone else. So how does Little Lionheart compare? Overall, I am very impressed with this model, and of all of the manufacturers, I'm glad it was Rapido trains to make it. This is the first of their models I've bought, but I would buy again. There is a high effort in getting it to look right, but perhaps more importantly, that it functions above what it's expected to do. The biggest letdown for me is the colour choice. Of course, this is a gimmicky livery, but it does appear a little too toy-like for me, which I'll hopefully set about rectifying. Considering how delicate parts of the real loco are, they've done very well to make it robust. Pioneering railways seem to be the trend for 00 manufacturers at the moment, and Lion is a key part of that. As for Thunderbolt herself, if Rapido didn't make it in this livery, they knew people would paint it as such anyway. So they made the very sensible decision to obtain the official licensing. Frustrating as it may be, I think they also made a wise choice to have this loco only available in the train pack. Far fewer people would buy the towed brake van and Dan's house if you could get Thunderbolts separately, but people would still have complained if Rapido trains didn't make them as well. As you can hear, I didn't get the deluxe DCC pack, so I'm deprived of the lovely artwork from that box. But more annoyingly, the 3D prints of the characters courtesy of Model U. There were early plans to have larger prints of the characters too, but I believe they didn't turn out as well as expected, so Model U were brought on board. Sadly, and I did ask, Model U can't sell the figures separately, so anyone who doesn't model in DCC has to find alternatives to prevent Thunderbolt running as a ghost train. What you do get is a very handy booklet telling you information about the real life rolling stock, their role in the film, and of course advice on how to look after the models. There's a couple of grammatical errors if that's of any issue, but what I do like is that the booklet is written with some humour and passion. That, coupled with colour photos from the film, make it far more enjoyable than reading a black and white IKEA-style manual. The train pack retails at £299.95 and the DCC Deluxe pack at £399.95. Certainly enough to make you do a double take, but considering this presumably covers licensing fees to allow such models to exist, makes it slightly more justified. Rapido trains on their part have gone all out to make sure that they make the most of having the right to sell using the film's name. I have only covered half of what you get in the pack, and will be adding my own modifications to the whole train and the bar car in the second part. On the film star herself, what do you think? Have I been harsh or perhaps missed something that you've noticed on the model? This is one I've been very excited to get, so perhaps you were the same. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And check out the playlist for a whole range of other Titfield Thunderbolt videos. Goodbye for now, my dear friends. Many thanks to my brilliant channel patrons: Alex Goodman, GBH Train, D0280 Falcon, Sean Tempest, Random Thomas Fan, Dark White 73, Andrew Dyack, and Jude 72.